TSA. Agent humiliates black woman over boarding pass, then discovers she owns the airline. Ebony Morgan stepped into John F. Kennedy International Airport with confidence in her stride and a secret in her heart. Passers-by noticed her poised demeanor, but none could guess the power she wielded behind her calm exterior. She was moments away from boarding a flight that would decide the trajectory of her expanding empire. Yet fate had something entirely different in store for her that day, an unexpected confrontation that would unravel the best-kept secret she held. She was no ordinary passenger. In a matter of minutes, a single TSA agent's brusque behavior would spark a showdown that no one in Terminal 4 would ever forget. Ebony Morgan's alarm had buzzed at precisely 5:00 a.m. Her routine was meticulously curated. It had to be. As the founder, CEO, and majority shareholder of Skystream Airlines, a rapidly rising name in the aviation industry, she had no room for chaos in her schedule. Every morning, she rose before dawn to meditate, exercise, and organize her thoughts. She would spend 10 minutes reviewing personal affirmations, another 15 in vigorous yoga practice, then finish with a quick shower and a healthy breakfast of oatmeal and fruit. Discipline was her key. She had built her empire on it. At just 35 years old, Ebony was a remarkable figure. Raised by a single mother in a modest Philadelphia neighborhood, she had learned early on that she would have to fight for every inch of success. She had grown accustomed to the subtle and sometimes overt racism embedded in society, determined not to let it stifle her. Over the years, she had sharpened her intelligence and resilience into a formidable force. By the time she graduated from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, she had garnered a full-ride scholarship and the admiration of professors who saw in her a spark of brilliance. But Ebony never boasted. She didn't need to. She let her actions speak for themselves. Through grit, relentless networking, and an uncanny eye for profitable opportunities, she had taken ownership of a small, struggling regional airline. By methodical planning, top-notch recruitment, and innovative ideas like carbon-friendly aircraft retrofitting and personalized in-flight entertainment, she turned that modest venture into Skystream Airlines, a brand that now spanned domestic routes across the United States and was making inroads into international travel. Word was that her airline was set to partner with a major European carrier soon, which would thrust Skystream onto the global stage. Ebony was traveling to Los Angeles for a crucial meeting to finalize those negotiations. She parked her sleek black SUV at a private facility near JFK, typically avoiding the chaos of the regular parking structure. Not because she considered herself too important, on the contrary, Ebony prided herself on her humility, but because punctuality was everything and the private facility saved her valuable time that morning. She carried a single piece of rolling luggage and a stylish yet practical tote bag containing her laptop, folders, and personal essentials. As she entered Terminal 4, Ebony looked around. Airports always gave her a sense of excitement and possibility. That day, she felt a twinge of nervousness, a sixth sense that something was off. She chalked it up to anxiety over her meeting in Los Angeles. She had no idea the day held a trial of an entirely different sort. Ebony made her way to the security checkpoint. Although she was the majority shareholder of Skystream Airlines and was thus well known within many airline circles, she was not, by nature, someone who flaunted her status. She believed in treating others with respect, and she had a deep admiration for frontline employees. After all, they were the backbone of any operation, whether it was an airline, a hotel, or a restaurant. She often told her top executives, "We don't succeed without the people who wear name tags. Treat them as your equals or better." The line that morning was moderately long but moving at a steady pace. She joined the queue patiently, gazing around at the swirl of travelers, families lugging strollers, business people tapping on phones, couples on vacation, everyone with their own story. She seldom traveled incognito, but she did prefer to keep a low profile in situations like this. The fewer people who recognized her, the simpler her journey. Her assistant, Marcia, was scheduled to meet her at the gate. Marcia had taken an earlier flight from Atlanta and would connect at JFK for the final leg to Los Angeles. Ebony was looking forward to finalizing some presentation slides with Marcia before the big meeting. As Ebony inched closer to the TSA document check podium, she noticed a commotion near the front. A tall, broad-shouldered TSA officer, whose name tag read Randall, was speaking sternly to a young Latina woman. Ebony couldn't catch the details of the conversation, but the traveler was clearly distressed. The man's face was a stone mask of authority. The traveler eventually cleared the podium, eyes downcast. Randall jerked his chin, signaling her to move along. Ebony felt a pang of sympathy as she watched the woman walk away with slumped shoulders. But Ebony also reminded herself that not every confrontation was rooted in discrimination or prejudice. Sometimes rules are rules. Perhaps the woman's ID was expired or there was some other legitimate issue. When it was Ebony's turn, she offered Randall her ID and boarding pass with a polite smile. He took them wordlessly, eyes flicking to her face and back to the documents. Ebony sensed something off in his demeanor, an edginess. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to typical airport tensions. After all, TSA agents deal with thousands of passengers daily, some of whom are impatient or argumentative. Randall's gaze lingered on her ID a moment too long. "Where are you headed today?" he asked, voice clipped. "Los Angeles," Ebony replied, maintaining her pleasant tone. "What's the purpose of your trip?" Ebony paused. Usually, TSA didn't ask for a traveler's personal business unless there was a direct security concern, but she also knew some random screenings required basic questions. "Business," she said succinctly. He handed back her ID, but kept the boarding pass. "I need to see your second form of ID," she blinked. "My second form of ID," he nodded curtly. "Yes, ma'am." Ebony rifled through her tote bag. She hadn't been asked for a second form of ID in years. She found her company ID badge, nothing official like a government-issued credential, but it did have her name and photo. She handed it over. Randall inspected it with the same suspicious air. "What business do you handle in Los Angeles?" he continued, hooking his thumbs in his belt. Ebony forced a smile, trying not to feel rattled. "I have some meetings," she replied, refusing to elaborate. Randall's eyes narrowed. "This is a company ID. That's not an official government document. I asked for a second form of government-issued ID. That's odd," Ebony thought. She calmly explained, "I don't typically carry two government-issued IDs. My driver's license is my only one. It should be valid." She pointed to the license he'd just handed back. He looked unimpressed. "Please step aside to the secondary screening area." Ebony felt her stomach clench. She was no stranger to random checks, but something in his tone told her this wasn't random at all. People behind her in line were beginning to stare, yet Ebony moved aside without protest. She wouldn't make a scene. Her dignity was worth more than her pride. In the secondary screening area, a female TSA agent named Martina guided Ebony through the standard procedures, removing shoes, getting patted down, opening her bags. Martina remained professional, although Ebony sensed a certain hesitance, perhaps a reaction to Randall's watchful presence nearby. Randall hovered in the background, arms crossed. When Martina was done, Ebony assumed she would be allowed to proceed. However, Randall stepped forward. "Let me see that boarding pass again," he insisted. Ebony handed it over. "Is there a problem?" He scrutinized it. This seemed suspicious. She felt her heart rate spike. Suspicious. "Why?" He tapped the corner of the paper. "You printed this at home, correct?" Ebony resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Yes, like many people do, people can forge these. Ebony took a deep breath. I assure you, it's legitimate. I booked through the airline website and printed it last night. He looked over at Martina. Check if we have a reprint from the kiosk. Martina offered Ebony a thin smile. If you'd like to reprint your boarding pass at the kiosk, we can verify the authenticity. It'll just take a minute. Ebony paused. She always tried to remain empathetic toward TSA staff. They have tough jobs. Yet Randall's attitude was deeply unsettling. Was he simply being overcautious, or was there something more nefarious at play? She recognized that spark of suspicion, that condescending note in his voice. She had encountered it before, too many times to count. She nodded and followed Martina to a nearby kiosk. Randall trailed behind. Martina motioned for Ebony to scan the barcode. Ebony did so, and the kiosk displayed her flight details instantly. Martina printed the fresh pass. Randall snatched it before Ebony could reach for it and inspected it closely. Finally, with a huff, he returned it to Ebony. "All right, you can go," he muttered, sounding almost disappointed that the kiosk had validated her flight. Ebony gave him a tight smile. She had half a mind to reveal who she was, but she didn't. She had no desire to wave her status around just to smooth over a rude encounter. Instead, she picked up her belongings and walked off to retrieve her shoes, bag, and belt from the tray. She heard Randall's snide remark just as she was turning away. "Some people think they can sneak through the system, but not on my watch." Heat flared in Ebony's chest. She wanted to confront him, but took a breath. She decided it wasn't worth the energy. She had a flight to catch, a company to run, and an empire to expand. She was in every sense above such petty conflicts. At least, that's what she told herself at the time. Ebony navigated the crowds of Terminal 4, each step echoing with unresolved tension. She told herself to shake it off. She had faced far worse discrimination in her life. During her teenage years, store clerks had followed her around, suspecting shoplifting. At university, some classmates assumed her acceptance was purely the result of affirmative action rather than her stellar grades. And even in the professional world, Ebony had encountered investors who spoke to her male colleagues instead of her, as though she were invisible in the boardroom. But after so many years of fighting and proving herself, Ebony had hoped she was immune or at least numb to small injustices. Yet every slight stung, perhaps because it reminded her of the world's persistent undercurrents of prejudice. She refused to allow such negativity to define her, but the burn lingered. She spotted a coffee shop near Gate B22. A jolt of caffeine might settle her nerves before her flight. Standing in line, Ebony glanced at a TV monitor behind the counter that displayed CNN. She saw headlines about social justice issues, about how protests in various cities were demanding equality in law enforcement practices and training. Ebony sighed. Change was slow, painfully slow. Even though she rarely craved the spotlight, she sometimes thought, if only people knew who I really am, if only they realized that a black woman can run one of the fastest-growing airlines in the country, maybe they would think twice before making snap judgments. As she reached the cashier, Ebony smiled politely and ordered a black coffee with a dash of almond milk. While waiting for her drink, she absent-mindedly checked her phone. She saw a text from Marsha. Marsha 649 AM landed in JFK. Gate B30. We'll see you soon. Hope security wasn't too bad. Ebony typed back a quick response, glossing over the incident with Randall. She didn't want to burden Marsha with her frustrations. Time was money, and they had slides to polish before meeting the potential international partners. Ebony took her coffee and headed to Gate B30 to meet her assistant. Marsha was standing near a pillar, flipping through her tablet. She brightened the moment she spotted Ebony. A petite, sharp-eyed woman with a flair for details, Marsha had been Ebony's assistant for nearly 5 years. They had built a close rapport that was part friendship, part mentorship. "You look a bit tense," Marcia observed, offering Ebony a concerned look. "Everything okay?" Ebony waved off the concern with a faint smile. "Just a TSA agent who decided to give me a hard time." Marcia shook her head. "I can't believe that still happens to you. You'd think a big name and bigger bank account would grant me immunity," Ebony quipped wryly. "But apparently not." Marcia touched Ebony's arm gently. "I'm sorry you had to go through that again. Are you going to report him?" Ebony shrugged. "I'm not sure. I didn't get his full name, just saw Randall on his badge. And I'm running on a schedule here. I'd rather focus on the meeting." Marcia nodded in understanding. "Still, if you ever decide to, I'll back you up. People like that need accountability." Ebony grinned. "Thanks. Let's see how the rest of the day goes." They settled into seats near Gate B30 and began reviewing the presentation slides on Marcia's tablet. Ebony's mind gradually shifted from the morning's unpleasantness to the details of the negotiations in Los Angeles. She was meeting representatives of a major European airline with the aim of establishing a code-share partnership. If successful, Skystream could expand its network to include Europe, and her partner airline could gain a stronger foothold in key American cities. It was a high-stakes deal, one Ebony had been courting for over a year. She lost herself in strategy discussions with Marcia, analyzing potential routes and revenue projections. The hum of the airport faded into the background, overshadowed by Ebony's driving ambition. Yet, somewhere in the recesses of her mind, the memory of Randall's sneer persisted. She filed it away, certain that the day would eventually come when she would no longer have to endure such hostility. The time came to board. Ebony and Marcia collected their belongings. Skystream's flight to Los Angeles was on a smaller Boeing 737 that Ebony's airline had newly retrofitted. The plane shone with a freshly painted livery, the distinctive Skystream logo, a sleek silver and blue design representing forward motion, emblazoned along the fuselage. Since Ebony preferred to keep a low profile, she and Marcia had standard business-class tickets, not the special seats or private accommodations that someone of her stature might otherwise enjoy. She let her executive team or other VIPs take advantage of such amenities. To Ebony, success did not mean extravagance, it meant efficiency and comfort. As they neared the jet bridge, Ebony's phone buzzed. She stepped aside to check it while Marcia continued forward. Suddenly, Ebony heard a familiar voice. "You! Hey, you!" Her pulse quickened. She glanced up to see none other than TSA Officer Randall marching briskly across the gate area. A wave of confusion and dread washed over her. Why is he here? She watched, stunned, as he approached the gate agent who was scanning boarding passes. Randall spoke to the gate agent in a low voice, and the agent's eyes widened, flicking from Randall to Ebony. The gate agent cleared his throat, nodded, and waited for Randall to finish. Randall then took a position near the gate podium, folding his arms with an air of smug authority. Ebony approached cautiously. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a man named Oscar. He looked from the pass to Ebony, then back to the pass. He swallowed audibly. "Miss, Morgan?" Oscar stammered. "That's me," Ebony confirmed, forcing a calm tone. "Officer Randall here has expressed a concern about the validity of your pass," Oscar said nervously. Ebony couldn't believe what she was hearing. She felt her heart thunder in her chest. "We literally just scanned it at the kiosk. I also checked in online. The pass is valid." Randall gave a thin, mocking smile. "I have reason to suspect it may be tampered with, so I need you to step aside, ma'am." Marcia, who had already boarded, noticed the commotion from inside the aircraft door. She turned around, alarmed. Ebony placed a calming hand on Marcia's arm. "Go on," she mouthed. "I'll handle this." Yet Ebony herself felt an internal tremor. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. It felt targeted. She tried to remain composed, resisting the urge to bring up her position with Skystream. She shouldn't have to brandish her title like a weapon to be treated with basic respect. Oscar looked uncomfortable. I have to follow TSA protocols, he muttered apologetically. Randall gestured for Ebony to accompany him a short distance away from the gate. By now, other passengers were watching the scene with curiosity, some with sympathy, others with confusion. Once out of earshot, Ebony faced Randall head-on. I don't understand why you're doing this. I've been through security already. He stared down at her. We have a right to question any suspicious passenger. I don't make the rules, I enforce them. Ebony held his gaze. Suspicious how? Randall's lips twitched in annoyance. That's classified. She folded her arms. Do you have any concrete reasons to doubt my boarding pass? Or is this harassment? A flicker of something crossed his expression, anger, fear, or both. Watch your tone, he growled. Ebony felt a cold fury sear through her. The old Ebony might have backed down, eager to avoid further trouble. But she had built an airline from scratch. She had faced down board members and bankers who doubted her. She was no stranger to confronting powerful figures. Now, she realized, this was bigger than personal affront. It was about principle. You're out of line, she said quietly, but firmly. And I will be reporting you, Randall's sneer returned. Go ahead. See who believes you. Meanwhile, you're not boarding this flight until I complete my checks. Ebony exhaled, nodding slowly, as though reaching a resolution in her mind. Fine. Do your checks. But let me remind you, the airline is on my side. Randall's eyebrows rose. Is that supposed to be a threat? Ebony mustered a small smile. It's not a threat, Officer Randall. It's simply a fact you're going to learn sooner or later. Randall consulted with the airport security manager via phone, presumably trying to justify this extra measure. Ebony waited with forced patience, arms crossed over her chest, refusing to be intimidated. Nearby, a cluster of passengers had formed, whispering among themselves. Some recognized Ebony from business magazines or financial news segments. Others were clueless, but knew that something unusual was going on. Marcia peeked out from the plane's entrance again. Ebony gave her a gentle nod of reassurance. She could see the flight attendants shift uneasily, uncertain whether to intervene. Finally, Randall hung up the phone and pivoted to face Ebony. "Step over to that bench," he ordered, pointing to a small seating area near the gate. "I need to search your carry-on." Without a word, Ebony complied. She handed him her tote bag. He rifled through it more thoroughly than Martina had done earlier. He inspected Ebony's laptop, even asking for her password. Ebony hesitated but decided to provide it, on the condition he keep her screen turned away from prying eyes. He complied with minimal courtesy, opening random files and scanning them. She wondered if he had any real reason for doing this, or if this was simply a show of power. Once done, he moved on to her carry-on luggage, rummaging through her clothing, her toiletry bag, her neatly packed folders for the Los Angeles presentation. Ebony silently prayed he wouldn't lose or mix up the important documents that she needed for her meeting. He eventually zipped everything back up, unsatisfied but unable to find anything incriminating. He looked up at her, frustration evident on his face. "Your airline ticket is still under suspicion," he muttered. Ebony's gaze was steady. "Then I'd like to speak to a supervisor." Randall took a step closer, lowering his voice so others couldn't hear. "You think you can just waltz in here, forging boarding passes for business class seats? You probably can't afford something." In Ebony broke. She had tried to remain composed, but the blatant prejudice, laden with the assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly afford a premium ticket, was too much. Her fury flared hot, but she clung to her composure. She locked eyes with him, her voice trembling only slightly. "I'm warning you, you're making a grave mistake," he smirked. "I doubt that." Before Ebony could respond, a voice called out, "Ebony, there you are." She turned to see one of her own pilots, Captain Lorraine Phillips, hurrying over. Captain Phillips was on a different flight, but she recognized Ebony from across the terminal. The middle-aged pilot wore the distinguished dark blue uniform of Skystream Airlines, her short hair pinned neatly under her cap. "Ma'am," Captain Phillips said, addressing Ebony in a tone of deep respect, "I was just about to board my flight at gate 28 when I saw you here. Is everything all right?" Randall's eyes darted between Ebony and Captain Phillips. Ebony gave the TSA officer a pointed look. "No, it's not all right. There seems to be an issue with my boarding pass." Captain Phillips appeared genuinely perplexed. "Your boarding pass? But you're Ebony Morgan." Randall rolled his eyes. "So?" Captain Phillips straightened to her full height, turning to Randall. "So? She's the majority shareholder and CEO of Skystream Airlines, the very airline operating this flight." A flicker of panic crossed Randall's features. "That can't be true," he muttered, though his voice lacked the earlier bravado. Ebony suppressed the mix of anger and triumph swirling in her chest. She maintained a calm facade, as she had been trained by years of navigating press conferences and corporate events. "It's true," she said firmly. "And all morning you've been harassing me under false pretenses." Captain Phillips looked appalled. "Are you serious, ma'am?" "Did he?" Ebony raised a hand to calm the pilot. "Yes, but let's keep things professional." She then addressed Randall directly. "I would like to board my flight now. I've been more than cooperative with your searches. I have crucial business awaiting me in Los Angeles, and you've crossed several lines today." Randall's face had turned ashen. The watchful eyes of passengers, flight attendants, and other airline personnel were now fixated on him, awaiting his reaction. He cleared his throat. "I was just doing my job." "I had no idea." Ebony cut him off gently but firmly. "I don't believe you. Whether or not you knew who I was is irrelevant. You singled me out for scrutiny that was unwarranted, ignoring all evidence that my documents were legitimate. You insisted on humiliating me publicly." Randall opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The adrenaline that had fueled his smug behavior now seemed to have drained away, leaving him pale and uncertain. Before Randall could stammer a response, a second TSA officer, this one with a supervisor's badge, approached, flanked by an airline representative. The supervisor introduced herself as Denise Wagner, her expression serious. "Miss Morgan, we were alerted to a situation involving Officer Randall. Is everything okay here?" Ebony let out a measured breath. "I was prevented from boarding my rightful flight. I've been subjected to additional searches without proper cause." And Officer Randall made statements that were explicitly biased and defamatory. Denise Wagner's face hardened. "I see. I offer our sincerest apologies on behalf of the TSA. Please, go ahead and board. We'll handle the matter from here. Your flight is due to depart soon." Ebony nodded. "Thank you." She paused, then addressed Denise in a level tone. "I would like to file a formal complaint, though. Words alone aren't enough. I appreciate that you came, but I want a documented investigation into Randall's behavior. This is about more than me. It's about ensuring no one else faces this." Denise nodded somberly. "Absolutely, ma'am. We'll begin an inquiry right away." With that, Ebony gathered her items, exchanged a quick look with Captain Phillips, and stepped toward the jet bridge. Relief washed over her, though she could still feel the eyes of curious onlookers. She made direct eye contact with Randall one last time. He stood there, frozen, the weight of his looming consequences etched across his features. Safely aboard the plane, Ebony settled into her business-class seat beside Marcia, who looked both relieved and furious on Ebony's behalf. "Are you all right?" Marcia asked quietly. Ebony sighed. "Yes. A bit shaken, but I'm okay." She turned to the window, watching the bustling activity of baggage handlers and ground crew. The plane began to taxi away from the gate. "I just can't believe it escalated like that." Marcia placed a hand over Ebony's. "I'm so sorry." Ebony forced a small smile. "Thank you." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to bring her mind back to the upcoming meeting. Despite the emotional whirlwind, her sense of purpose remained strong. She had a multi-million-dollar partnership to secure, and she wasn't about to let one racist encounter throw her off her game. The flight attendants recognized Ebony, of course, and discreetly checked on her without making a fuss. One flight attendant, a tall man in his mid-40s, offered Ebony a glass of sparkling water and a sympathetic look. Ebony accepted with a thankful nod. She never wanted her staff to feel obligated to treat her like royalty, but in moments like this, she appreciated the subtle gestures of concern. When the plane reached cruising altitude, Ebony powered on her laptop. She needed to lose herself in work to cleanse her mind of the unpleasant morning. She typed out a draft of her formal complaint regarding Randall, detailing the timeline of events and the manner in which he had confronted her. Part of her wanted to let the matter go, but she knew such incidents wouldn't stop unless people spoke up. She planned to send the complaint to TSA's official channel and possibly the Department of Homeland Security if needed. Marcia worked on the final touches of the presentation, occasionally glancing over to see Ebony's progress. The hum of the plane's engines and the gentle sway of mild turbulence provided a cocoon of focus. Outside the window, clouds drifted by, bathed in sunlight. As she typed, Ebony's mind drifted back to her youth. Scenes flashed, a scrawny teenager in baggy clothes, standing in a grocery store aisle, feeling the eyes of the store manager following her every move. Her mother, Regina, had always insisted, "You are worthy, Ebony. Don't let anyone's ignorance define your path." She remembered the sting of being the only black girl in her advanced math class, how other students seemed shocked whenever she aced an exam. That memory receded, replaced by another, Ebony at Wharton, standing confidently at the podium, delivering a speech on innovative airline business models. She had soared through the ranks, determined to never let prejudice clip her wings. Now, Ebony had turned a flailing commuter airline into Skystream, poised on the brink of global recognition. She had built a brand that promised not just affordability and comfort, but also corporate responsibility, more women pilots, more people of color in leadership roles, and a progressive approach to sustainable flying. She intended to change the narrative of what an airline could be, and she had succeeded, at least in many respects. Yet no matter how far she rose, she still found herself in confrontations that served as bitter reminders. For some, seeing a black woman in a position of wealth and authority was either inconceivable or outright threatening. She typed her complaint with renewed purpose, forging each word like a sword against the injustices that still persisted. By the time she finished, the cabin lights dimmed for the mid-flight rest. She closed her laptop, her body and mind exhausted. Skystream Flight 208 landed in Los Angeles smoothly, greeted by bright sunshine and palm trees swaying outside the airport windows. As Ebony and Marcia disembarked, a sense of relief filled Ebony's chest. She loved New York, but this morning's ordeal had worn her down. The warmth of California felt like a balm. They headed straight to the baggage claim, where a driver awaited them with a sign reading Morgan. Ebony rarely used this service, but the day's schedule was tight. They needed to get to a hotel conference room in downtown La for the major negotiation with the European airline executives. During the drive, Marcia reviewed the itinerary. They had exactly 45 minutes to check in at the hotel, freshen up, and then meet with the delegation. Despite the tension swirling in Ebony's mind, she forced herself to focus on the big opportunity. She wouldn't let one TSA officer overshadow the potential for Skystream's expansion. At the hotel, Ebony and Marcia took the elevator to the 21st floor, stepping into a spacious, sunlight drenched suite of conference rooms reserved for high-profile meetings. The walls were sleek glass, providing panoramic views of the La skyline. Ebony felt a swell of pride. This was her element, the realm of possibilities and strategic alliances. Moments later, a knock on the glass door signaled the arrival of Herr Johannes Engel, the CEO of Lufteuropa, a German airline with extensive connections throughout Europe. He was accompanied by his vice presidents, a few legal advisors, and interpreters. Though Engel spoke perfect English, Miss Morgan, Engel greeted her with a warm handshake. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you face to face." "Likewise," Ebony replied, mustering a bright smile. "I have been looking forward to this for a long time." They exchanged pleasantries as the rest of Engel's team settled around the conference table. Waiters brought in coffee, tea, and an array of pastries. Ebony introduced Marcia, who began distributing copies of the presentation. The meeting started on a high note, with Engel praising Skystream's innovation and competitive edge in the US market. Ebony returned the compliment by acknowledging Lufteuropa's reputation for efficiency and excellence. They moved on to discuss the intricacies of the potential code-share agreement, route overlaps, cost-sharing formulas, brand alignment, marketing campaigns, and frequent flyer reciprocity. Ebony had spent countless hours with her analysts, preparing for each point of negotiation. Yet, a dull ache lingered in the back of her mind, a reminder of the humiliations that same morning. Every now and then she'd lose a bit of focus, the memory of Randall's sneer creeping into her thoughts. Each time she pushed it away, refocusing on the conversation at hand. She refused to let the negativity overshadow a deal that could take Skystream into a new era. Hours passed. The meeting was fruitful, though not fully concluded. They agreed to finalize certain aspects in a follow-up session the next day. Engel's team departed, leaving Ebony and Marcia to debrief. As Ebony gathered her documents, her phone vibrated with an email notification. She glanced at the sender. It was from the TSA at JFK. Curiosity piqued. Ebony opened the email. It was brief, subject, formal apology, and update on investigation. "Dear Miss Morgan, we have received your complaint regarding the incident involving Officer Randall at John F. Kennedy International Airport on date. We take such matters seriously. After an initial inquiry, we have placed Officer Randall on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. The TSA sincerely apologizes for any distress caused. We will follow up with a complete report. If you have any further concerns or additional information to share, please contact me directly at the number below. Sincerely, Denise Wagner, TSA Supervisory Officer, JFK." Ebony exhaled. She felt a mixture of relief and a hollow sense of vindication. It wouldn't erase the pain or the embarrassment of that morning, but at least there was some accountability in motion. She showed Marcia the email. Marcia gave a tight, satisfied smile. "That's a start." Ebony nodded. "It is. I just hope that a real lesson is learned here." News of the incident traveled faster than Ebony could have imagined. A passenger in the terminal had recorded the confrontation on their phone and posted it on social media, tagging Skystream Airlines, Ebony Morgan, and multiple news outlets. By the time Ebony and Marcia returned to their hotel rooms, Ebony's phone was bombarded with notifications. Social media was in a frenzy. People were reacting with outrage, demanding that TSA address potential racist behavior. Others questioned if Ebony had pulled rank to get the officer in trouble. In short, Ebony was at the center of a controversy that extended far beyond her personal experience. She scrolled through hundreds of messages, some supportive, some hateful, some accusing her of playing the race card, others championing her as a symbol of resilience. The swirl of online debate felt overwhelming, yet Ebony realized this was an opportunity to stand up and speak out. She drafted a statement to post on her official social media profiles. Ebony Morgan, At Ebony Morgan Official, I experienced a troubling incident at JFK Airport today involving harassment and unjust scrutiny by a TSA officer. While I regret the need for public attention, I believe it's important to address discrimination wherever it appears. This isn't just about me, it's about any traveler who faces bias for their race, gender, or background. I appreciate the TSA's swift response in initiating an investigation. I hope that through this process, we can foster change and ensure fair treatment for all passengers. I remain committed to working with my airline, our staff, and relevant authorities to promote equality in aviation and beyond. She pressed post and set her phone aside, letting the wave of comments swirl without her immediate involvement. Tomorrow, she would continue negotiations, secure the code-share deal, and prove once more that her identity was not an obstacle, but a testament to her strength. Late that evening, Ebony found herself alone in her hotel suite. She sank into the armchair by the window, gazing at the city lights shimmering under a starless sky. Her mind churned, not just with the business negotiations, but also with the avalanche of public attention. A part of her felt worn out, dismayed by how easily one person's prejudice could overshadow her sense of peace. Another part felt invigorated, ready to champion the cause of those who silently endure such discrimination every day. She thought back to her mother's words, "You are worthy. Don't let anyone's ignorance define your path." She sipped a cup of herbal tea, reflecting on the day. She had wanted to focus on business, but fate had other plans. Perhaps it was a sign that her success was not meant to be kept quiet. Maybe it was time to use her platform more openly to fight for fairness and equality in all corners of the travel industry. Her phone buzzed again, another alert. She glanced at the screen to see a text message from her mother. Regina, 10:15 p.m. I saw the video on the news. Baby, proud of you for standing your ground. You've done so much for so many. Don't let the haters slow you down. Love you. Ebony felt tears prick her eyes. She typed a simple reply, Ebony 10:16 p.m. Thanks, Mum. Love you too. And with that, Ebony set aside her phone, closed her eyes, and drifted into a fitful sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring a different battle, a corporate negotiation that held the promise of expanding her airline's horizons. Yet somehow, she felt more prepared than ever, buoyed by the conviction that she was not just fighting for herself, but for every traveler who deserved respect and dignity. Morning brought new energy. Ebony woke early, reviewed the negotiation points one last time, and prepared for the second round of talks with Lufthansa. This time, she wore a navy blue suit that accentuated her calm authority. In the mirror, she saw not just a businesswoman, but an advocate, a daughter, a leader, someone who understood the weight of representation. Engel and his team arrived promptly. The discussions were thorough, filled with legal jargon and detailed analysis of cost structures and route planning. By midday, both parties had reached an agreement in principle. Ebony shook Engel's hand, beaming with genuine excitement. "This is just the beginning of a great partnership," Engel declared. "Agreed," Ebony replied, her eyes shining. "Thank you for believing in Skystream." Engel laughed. "It's not hard to believe in success when it stands right in front of you." When the final handshake was done, Ebony leaned back in her chair, exhaling with satisfaction. She glanced at Marcia, who was grinning ear to ear. This code-share deal would catapult Skystream into a new league, bridging American travelers to cities across Europe and vice versa. It was the fruition of years of relentless work. The following day, Ebony headed back to LAX for her return flight to JFK. This time, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The entire fiasco with TSA Officer Randall hovered in her memory. She passed through security with minimal fuss, albeit noticing the curious glances from some of the agents who may have recognized her from the viral story. On the plane, Ebony settled into her seat. She hoped to catch up on some rest before diving back into the flurry of emails and calls waiting for her at headquarters. As the aircraft soared across the country, she found a rare moment to read the comments on her social media post. She was touched by the outpouring of support from various corners of the globe, people who identified with her story, who had faced discrimination themselves, or who simply admired her perseverance. When the plane touched down at JFK, Ebony gathered her belongings. She and Marcia stepped off the aircraft, each lost in her own thoughts about the days ahead. Ebony looked forward to returning to her office, to chart the next steps in implementing the partnership with Lufthansa. However, at the arrivals gate, she was greeted by an unexpected figure, Denise Wagner, the TSA supervisor. She stood there, flanked by a middle-aged man in a suit. Concern was etched on Denise's face. "Miss Morgan, welcome back," Denise said, her tone cordial but reserved. Ebony glanced at Marcia, then back at Denise. "Hello, everything all right?" Denise nodded, then introduced the man beside her. "This is Harold McKnight, our regional manager. He wanted to speak with you personally." McKnight extended a hand. "Miss Morgan, a pleasure." "We deeply regret what happened during your last visit to JFK." Ebony nodded, uncertain. "Thank you." McKnight gestured toward a quiet corner of the corridor. "Could we have a brief word?" Ebony and Marcia exchanged looks. After a moment's hesitation, Ebony followed them. Once they stood out of the foot traffic, McKnight spoke in a measured tone. "I want to personally apologize for the behavior of Officer Randall. He's been placed on administrative leave, and we've initiated a thorough review of his conduct. There have been multiple complaints about him in the past, though none escalated like yours did. However, your case shed new light on some serious issues." Ebony felt a pang of sympathy for the other victims who hadn't had her platform. "I appreciate the update," she said, crossing her arms. "What happens now?" McKnight nodded gravely. "We're implementing additional training, including implicit bias workshops for all TSA officers at JFK. Randall will face disciplinary action up to and including termination if our investigation confirms he discriminated against you based on race." Ebony inhaled, her posture softening slightly. Thank you. That's a start." Denise spoke up. "We also want to stress that our organization doesn't tolerate such behavior. We hope this unfortunate incident can lead to positive changes in our system." Ebony studied them both. She saw genuine concern, but also the wariness of bureaucracy. Change is never instant or easy, yet at least there was movement in the right direction. She offered a polite smile. "I accept your apologies, and I'm willing to consult if you need insights into how to treat diverse travelers fairly, especially in a business as sensitive as security." McKnight's eyes lit up. "We'd very much appreciate that, Miss Morgan. Thank you." With that, Ebony concluded the brief meeting, her heart lighter. She turned to Marcia, who had been quietly observing. "Let's go home," Ebony said, a weary but victorious note in her voice. A week later, Ebony received a final update from the TSA. The investigation had concluded, and Officer Randall was officially terminated from his position. Evidence showed repeated incidents of racial profiling. In addition, Ebony's formal complaint and the supporting video from a bystander had left no doubt that Randall's actions were discriminatory and baseless. Ebony heard from other travelers who had similar experiences with Randall, praising her for taking a stand. She was humbled, realizing once more that her position of privilege could be used to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. But the karmic retribution didn't stop there. A local news station picked up the story, highlighting Randall's history of misconduct. The revelations tarnished his reputation. Ebony took no personal satisfaction in a man's downfall, but she recognized the necessity of accountability. After years of targeting travelers he perceived as lesser or suspicious, Randall finally faced consequences. Meanwhile, Ebony's story became something of a symbol. Media outlets spoke about the irony. The TSA agent who tried to humiliate a black woman over a boarding pass ended up confronting the airline owner. While Ebony didn't revel in the publicity, she used every interview to reiterate her core message about systemic issues in security and the broader travel industry. She advocated for more empathy, better training, and open dialogue. As Ebony carried on with her role at Skystream Airlines, orchestrating the new codeshare partnership, she saw a surge of positive customer feedback. Many passengers felt inspired by her leadership and resilience. Flight bookings increased, not just because of the new routes, but also because people wanted to support an airline helmed by a woman who championed fairness. Late one night, Ebony sat alone in her corner office at Skystream's Manhattan headquarters, gazing at the glittering skyline. So much had transpired in just a few weeks. She had expanded her airline's global reach and faced a very public battle with prejudice. She thought about the girl she once was, standing in that grocery store aisle, feeling the gaze of suspicion on her back. If only that girl could see her now owning an airline, shaping the future of air travel, and speaking up for those who couldn't. As Ebony reflected, Marcia knocked gently on the door and poked her head in. "Sorry, didn't mean to disturb you." "It's all right," Ebony said, motioning Marcia inside. "I was just thinking." Marcia approached with a smile. "I just got word. The codeshare system integration is going smoothly. The IT teams expect to launch new routes by the end of next quarter." Ebony nodded, her eyes brightening. "That's wonderful." They exchanged a few more updates, then Marcia hesitated. "Ebony, about the TSA incident." "I just wanted to say thank you for standing up for yourself and for so many others. You know, it could have been me or anyone else who doesn't have your influence." Ebony rose from her chair and hugged Marcia gently. "We stand up for each other, always." When Marcia left, Ebony turned back to the city lights. She felt an incredible sense of purpose. The fight wasn't over. There were still countless Randalls in the world, across numerous industries. But Ebony was determined to do her part in eradicating these biases. She would leverage her power, her success, and her voice to champion a more just future. And there you have it, the unforgettable clash between a formidable TSA agent and a woman whose power and poise went far beyond any boarding pass. Ebony Morgan's story reminds us that justice can arrive when least expected, and that sometimes the most effective way to dismantle prejudice is by confronting it head-on. In her journey from humiliation to vindication, Ebony shone a spotlight on an issue many people encounter daily, yet rarely have the platform to expose. If this story resonated with you, if you felt the sting of Ebony's plight and the triumph of her spirit, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. By supporting stories that champion fairness and resilience, you help spread the message that equality matters. Your engagement ensures tales like Ebony's echo far beyond the terminal gates, inspiring real change in airports, boardrooms, and communities across the globe. Thank you for watching.